More and more companies are starting to announce their return to work plans and announcing how they'll be handling vaccines. Just this week, the NFL said they plan to restrict employees who refuse COVID-19 vaccines without medical or religious reasons. So what does that mean for you and your job? Employment attorney Jamie Wright joining us this morning to answer some of your questions. Thanks so much for being here, Jamie.
Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Look, as someone who covers this daily, I keep hearing about this company and that company's plans for employees regarding vaccines. Also, what's required to get into sporting events. So let's just start with this. Can a company require its employees to get a COVID vaccine?
The answer is yes, with certain exceptions. Here in California, the Department of Fair Employment and Housing says that you can, as long as you don't discriminate against that employee based on protected categories that are stated in the law and ADA, disability and/or religious held beliefs. So the answer is yes, with those exceptions.
And when it comes to the religious held beliefs, you just have to say, simply put, for religious reasons, I don't want it? Or do you have to show any proof, or how does that kind of work?
It's a slightly heightened standard. It has to be a sincerely held religious belief. And what the case law says is that over time, this has been your belief. You actively practice in this faith, and there's some form of documentation that you can provide that say you're a member of a church, a mosque, a synagogue, to prove that this is your sincerely held belief and you're not just using it to get an exemption from the vaccination.
Is that kind of the same standard then when it comes to the medical exemptions?
Exactly. You have to have a documented medical condition that prevents you from getting a vaccination. And that would be the same if, say, you or I were asking for a protected leave under FMLA from our job.
What about when it comes to coworkers? I mean, some people like to keep this, a lot of people like to keep their medical information private. I mean, can an employer reveal, say, my vaccine status to other coworkers? Are there any legalities involved with that?
No, absolutely not. That would be a HIPAA violation. And California has really tightly held privacy rights for you as the employee, so they cannot reveal that information to coworkers. The only thing that someone can do in the workplace is state generally, because OSHA requires this to do this. If, say, for instance, there is an outbreak of COVID in your job, they have to give everyone in the workplace a notice that someone has contracted COVID, but it would never be your name.
If someone is out there and says, look, I just am refusing my employer's demands to get vaccinated. I'm just against it. What could happen to the employee?
They could be subjected to termination unless they have one of those exceptions to the law. If you don't have a disability, sincerely held religious belief, or if you find that your employer is discriminating against you based on some other protected category meaning race, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, then maybe you can stop it that way. But if there's none of that, then unfortunately you might be subject to termination because the employer has the right to mandate it.
Look, we've heard some people that have had adverse reactions to the vaccine, and potentially, just a hypothetical here, if there's an employee that didn't want to take it but has to return to work and they have an adverse reaction, I mean, can something like this lead to a potential lawsuit?
It can. Anything could lead to a lawsuit. The thing is that you would have to prove causation. You would have to prove that there's a direct cause between the employer mandating you getting this vaccine and having the adverse reaction. But what would likely happen is you would try to take up this cause of you having an adverse reaction in either the vaccine courts, which do exist, and/or a state and/or federal court against the vaccine maker. However, because there's so many descriptions of these are the potential reactions or adverse impacts of the vaccine, that might be really hard to prove.
Jamie, there might be a small business owner there out there right now, or potentially a large CEO of a company that's listening to this, that's getting ready to invite people back into the workplace, and they're not quite sure how to handle this whole vaccine issue. What is some guidance? What are some suggestions that you might have on how to have that constructive dialogue?
Well, the first thing I always recommend to people is have experienced employment law counsel on your team. That's a very important person to have. The other thing is I would consider checking with the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, the EEOC, to see what the law actually says, and then sending out notices to your employees in advance of what the policy will be regarding vaccinations, and then to really engage with your HR team and your relations team to talk to employees. Anyone have any concerns about the vaccination, come talk to us, have an open dialogue around it, any explanations, any concerns, have a private and security-based system where employees can give you feedback and or recommendations or concerns that they have where it's protected.
That was my next question. If you're an employee and you have some concerns, you're back in the workplace and they're starting to discuss the vaccine, do you just go to HR with your concerns? You just talk to the company president? What's your next steps there?
I would go to human resources. If you feel like you are being discriminated against based on a protected category, a disability, or a sincerely held religious belief, you can file a claim with the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. You can also reach out to Employment Counsel on the plaintiff side. There's some really good ones, and they can talk you through what your options are. But if you don't want to go the legal route, it's best to talk to human relations and or human resources in your company and see if you can start the interactive process to see if you are eligible for an accommodation from this vaccine.
If people have any more questions, they can also reach out to you as well. What's a great way to contact you?
Absolutely. I'm very easy to find. It's JamieWrightESQ.com. It's very easy. And or they can call me at 866-731-7505.
Jamie, always appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on the show and for your incredible insight on this.
Thank you very much.